space where wisdom meets purpose, where broken hearts find direction, and where ordinary lives are awakened into extraordinary destinies. Welcome to a place not built on noise but on truth, not on trends but on transformation. This is the Wisdom Embassy a channel created for thinkers, dreamers, believers, and warriors who refuse to live life without meaning. Here, we do not simply watch videos, we embark on journeys of awakening. Every message shared here is designed to challenge your mindset, strengthen your spirit, and reconnect you with the purpose placed inside you long before the world told you who you should be. In a world full of distractions, confusion, and constant pressure to become someone else, this channel exists to remind you of one powerful truth: you were created intentionally, and your life carries divine significance. Many people wake up every morning feeling lost even while having everything the world calls success. They chase validation, they compare their journeys, they silence their inner voice, and slowly forget who they truly are. But deep inside every human being lives a calling, a voice that whispers there must be more than this. That whisper is not weakness, it is purpose calling you back home. And this channel was born for that exact moment when your soul begins searching for deeper understanding. The Wisdom Embassy is not just a motivational channel. It is a sanctuary of growth, a place where spiritual wisdom, leadership principles, life lessons, and powerful reflections come together to build the person you were always meant to become. Inspired by timeless teachings and transformational thinkers, the messages you hear here aim to ignite clarity, confidence, faith, and disciplined action. If you have ever felt tired of living on autopilot, if you have ever questioned your direction, if you've ever wanted to unlock the best version of yourself, then you are exactly where you need to be. This is a community for people who choose growth over comfort, purpose over fear, and legacy over temporary success. Every episode you watch is crafted to speak not only to your mind but also to your heart. Because real transformation does not happen when information enters your ears, it happens when truth settles inside your spirit. These words are meant to encourage you when you feel weak, guide you when you feel uncertain, and remind you that greatness is not reserved for a few chosen people. It is available to anyone willing to grow, learn, and rise. Here we believe that leadership begins within, that discipline builds freedom, and that faith gives direction when logic alone cannot carry you forward. We believe your past does not define you, your circumstances do not limit you, and your current struggles are not your final chapter. Every challenge you face is preparing you, every setback is shaping you, and every lesson is moving you closer to the life designed specifically for you. As you listen today, allow yourself to slow down. Let the noise of the world fade for a moment. Take a deep breath and give yourself permission to reflect, to grow, and to become aware of the power already placed inside you. You are not here by accident. Something within you brought you to this moment, and that means transformation has already begun. If these words resonate with your heart, then you are not just a viewer, you are part of the Wisdom Embassy family. Together, we rise, together, we learn, and together we build lives filled with purpose, clarity, and impact. So wherever you are watching from, whatever struggles you carry, whatever dreams you are still afraid to speak aloud, know this: your journey matters, your growth matters, and your story is still being written. Now open your heart, focus your mind, and prepare yourself, because the wisdom you are about to hear may not only change how you think, it may change how you live forever. There comes a moment in every human life when the greatest battle is no longer outside but within. The real war is not fought against circumstances, people, enemies, or systems, but against thoughts, fears, doubts, and invisible limitations planted deep inside the mind. Many people pray for changed situations while heaven waits for a changed mindset. Because transformation does not begin in the environment, it begins in the mind. Scripture reminds us in Romans 12:2 that we must be transformed by the renewing of our mind. This means that spiritual growth and mental strength are inseparable. A renewed mind becomes the birthplace of a victorious life. Mental strength is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to stand firm when storms refuse to stop. It is the discipline to believe when evidence seems absent. It is the courage to continue when emotions beg you to quit. Faith was never designed to remove challenges, but to elevate you above them. The mind becomes strong when it learns to agree with divine truth instead of temporary feelings. Proverbs 23:7 declares that as a person thinks in the heart, so is that person. Your life eventually follows the direction of your thoughts. Many people are physically alive but mentally defeated. They wake up already tired, not because their bodies lack energy, but because their thoughts carry heavy burdens. Fear speaks louder than hope. Past failures echo louder than future possibilities. Yet Scripture teaches in Isaiah 26:3 that perfect peace belongs to those whose minds remain stayed on the Lord. Peace is not the result of easy circumstances, but disciplined focus. When the mind learns where to rest, it discovers strength that circumstances cannot steal. Mental conditioning begins with understanding identity. A person who does not know who they are will surrender to every opinion, every criticism, and every setback. The mind becomes unstable when identity is built on approval, achievement, or comparison. But when identity is rooted in divine purpose, stability is born. Jeremiah 29:11 reminds us that God knows the plans prepared for us, plans for hope and a future. Mental strength grows when a person realizes life is intentional, not accidental. Challenges are not interruptions to destiny. They are training grounds for maturity. David faced lions and bears before facing giants. Those hidden battles developed unseen strength. Many people want victory without preparation, but heaven prepares character before elevation. James 1:2-4 teaches believers to consider trials as opportunities for growth, because testing produces perseverance, and perseverance completes maturity. Mental strength is forged in moments when quitting feels easier than continuing. The mind must be trained like a muscle. Whatever you repeatedly think becomes stronger. If fear is practiced, fear becomes natural. If faith is practiced, courage becomes natural. Philippians 4:8 instructs believers to focus on whatever is true, noble, right, pure, and worthy of praise. This is not poetic advice, but psychological discipline. What occupies the mind eventually shapes behavior, emotions, and decisions. Every challenge first appears as a thought. Defeat begins as an internal conversation. Victory also begins there. The enemy of progress often whispers sentences like, "You are not enough, you are too late, you cannot recover." Mental strength refuses to accept these lies as truth. 2 Corinthians 10:5 instructs us to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. This reveals that thoughts are not masters, they are guests. You have authority over what stays in your mind. There are seasons when life feels unfair, when prayers seem delayed and doors remain closed. During these moments, mental strength means trusting purpose beyond understanding. Proverbs 3:5-6 encourages trusting the Lord with all the heart and not leaning on personal understanding. The mind wants explanations, but faith learns patience. Growth happens in hidden seasons where progress is invisible but transformation is active. Mental strength requires emotional discipline. Feelings are real, but they are not always reliable guides. Even prophets experience discouragement. Elijah once felt exhausted and hopeless despite witnessing miracles. Yet God restored him not by condemning weakness, but by renewing his strength step by step. 1 Kings 19 shows that restoration often begins with rest, nourishment, and gentle guidance. Mental strength includes caring for the soul, not ignoring human vulnerability. A conditioned mind understands that pain carries purpose. Hardship often reveals strengths that comfort could never produce. Romans 5:3-5 teaches that suffering produces perseverance, character, and hope. Hope becomes unshakable when it has survived adversity. The strongest believers are not those who avoided storms, but those who discovered divine presence within them. Discipline is the bridge between vision and reality. Many people desire greatness but avoid daily habits that develop greatness. Mental strength is built in small, unseen decisions. Waking up when motivation is absent. Praying when emotions feel dry. Continuing when results appear slow. Galatians 6:9 encourages believers not to grow weary in doing good, because harvest arrives for those who do not give up. Consistency trains the mind to endure beyond temporary discomfort. The battlefield of life is often imagination. Fear imagines failure before effort even begins. Anxiety predicts disasters that never occur. But faith imagines possibility aligned with divine promises. Hebrews 11:1 describes faith as confidence in what is hoped for and assurance about what is not yet seen. Mental strength allows vision to be stronger than visible obstacles. Words spoken to oneself shape mental reality. Many people unknowingly weaken their own minds through negative self-speech. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, according to Proverbs 18:21. Speaking hope even during struggle reprograms the mind toward resilience. When the heart speaks gratitude during hardship, it shifts focus from loss to purpose. Isolation weakens the mind, while spiritual connection strengthens it. Prayer aligns thoughts with heaven's perspective. Psalm 46:10 invites believers to be still and know that God is present. Stillness allows clarity to replace chaos. A quiet mind hears guidance more clearly than a restless one. Mental strength also requires forgiveness. Unforgiveness traps the mind in past pain. Carrying resentment drains emotional energy needed for future progress. Ephesians 4:31-32 calls believers to release bitterness and choose kindness and forgiveness. Freedom begins when the mind releases what it cannot change. Adversity often exposes hidden fears, but it also awakens hidden courage. Joshua 1:9 commands strength and courage not because challenges disappear, but because divine presence remains constant. Courage is not emotional excitement but obedient action despite fear. There are moments when progress feels slow and discouragement whispers that effort is useless. Yet seeds grow silently beneath soil before becoming visible. Mental strength trusts unseen development. Ecclesiastes 3:11 reminds us that everything becomes beautiful in its time. Timing belongs to God while persistence belongs to us. Comparison destroys mental strength. Looking at another person's journey creates unnecessary pressure and insecurity. Each calling carries unique timing and assignments. Psalm 139:14 declares that every person is wonderfully made. Confidence grows when the mind accepts individuality rather than chasing imitation. A strong mind learns gratitude even during uncertainty. Gratitude shifts perspective from scarcity to abundance. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 encourages giving thanks in all circumstances. Gratitude does not deny difficulty but recognizes divine faithfulness within difficulty. Fear loses power when confronted with truth. 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds believers that God has not given a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. A sound mind is disciplined, balanced, and resilient. It refuses panic because it understands authority over internal reactions. Mental conditioning requires patience with oneself. Growth is gradual. Transformation rarely happens overnight. Philippians 1:6 assures that the good work begun in us will be completed. This promise encourages persistence when progress feels slow. Resilience grows when purpose becomes greater than comfort. Those who understand calling endure hardship differently. Hebrews 12:11 acknowledges that discipline feels painful at the moment, but later produces righteousness and peace. Pain becomes meaningful when connected to growth. Every challenge invites a decision. You can interpret difficulty as punishment or preparation. The mind chooses interpretation, and interpretation shapes emotional response. Mental strength chooses to see training where others see defeat. Silence often becomes the classroom where strength is developed. In quiet moments, believers confront fears honestly and surrender them through prayer. Psalm 34:4 says that seeking the Lord brings deliverance from fears. Courage grows when fears are faced rather than avoided. Hope acts as mental armor. Without hope, the mind collapses under pressure. Lamentations 3:22-23 declares that divine mercies are new every morning. Each day becomes an opportunity to reset perspective regardless of yesterday's failures. A disciplined mind understands that setbacks do not define identity. Failure becomes information, not condemnation. Proverbs 24:16 teaches that the righteous fall but rise again. Rising again is the true evidence of strength. Endurance is the language of destiny. Those called to greater impact must develop greater mental capacity. Difficult seasons expand emotional endurance, spiritual awareness, and psychological resilience. What once seemed overwhelming eventually becomes manageable because strength has increased. Mental strength also grows through service. When attention shifts from personal struggles toward helping others, his perspective changes. Acts of compassion remind the mind that life holds purpose beyond personal comfort. Serving others strengthens emotional stability and deepens gratitude. Vision sustains perseverance. Without vision, people abandon effort quickly. Habakkuk 2:2 encourages writing vision clearly so that it guides action. A clear vision disciplines thoughts and prevents distraction. Many battles are won before they are visible because victory begins internally. When the mind refuses surrender, circumstances gradually align with persistence. Isaiah 40:31 promises renewed strength to those who wait upon the Lord. Waiting does not mean inactivity but trusting development while continuing faithful action. Mental strength requires guarding what enters the mind. Conversations, media, environments, and relationships influence internal belief systems. Proverbs 4:23 instructs guarding the heart because everything flows from it. Protecting mental space becomes essential for spiritual health. Confidence grows when past victories are remembered. David recalled earlier deliverance before confronting larger challenges. Reflection strengthens faith because it reminds the mind of divine faithfulness across seasons. There will be nights filled with uncertainty when answers seem distant and emotions feel heavy. Yet even in darkness, the mind can rest in assurance that purpose continues unfolding. Psalm 35 reminds us that weeping may endure for a night, but joy arrives with the morning. Strength develops when hope survives the night. The disciplined mind chooses faith repeatedly. It chooses belief when doubt feels natural. It chooses perseverance when exhaustion speaks loudly. It chooses trust even when outcomes remain unseen. Over time, these choices reshape character and transform destiny. Because mental strength is not inherited, it is cultivated daily through prayer, discipline, reflection, gratitude, forgiveness, perseverance, and unwavering belief that no challenge has authority greater than the purpose placed within you. And as the mind continues to align with divine truth, courage begins to replace fear, clarity replaces confusion, and endurance replaces hesitation until rising above challenges becomes not an occasional victory, but a permanent way of living where resilience becomes identity and the journey toward greater purpose continues to unfold. And as this transformation continues, the mind begins to recognize that strength is not produced in moments of comfort, but in seasons of resistance. Just as muscles grow when they are stretched beyond familiar limits, the human spirit grows when confronted with situations that demand deeper faith, stronger patience, and greater endurance. Every challenge becomes a classroom where heaven teaches resilience. The mind that once avoided difficulty begins to welcome growth, because it understands that pressure is not punishment but preparation. There are days when discouragement arrives quietly. It does not announce itself loudly but settles into thoughts like a slow fog. Suddenly motivation feels distant and confidence weakens. During such moments, mental strength is revealed through discipline rather than emotion. Psalm 42:11 speaks of speaking to one's own soul and asking why it is downcast while choosing to put hope in God. This shows that strength sometimes means preaching hope to yourself when no external voice encourages you. A conditioned mind understands that emotions fluctuate but purpose remains constant. Feelings change with circumstances, but calling does not change with feelings. Many abandon assignments not because they lack ability, but because they mistake emotional fatigue for divine direction. Yet endurance teaches the heart to move forward even when motivation fades. Faith becomes an anchor that stabilizes thoughts when emotional waves rise. Mental strength also grows through silence. In a noisy world filled with opinions, expectations, and comparisons, the mind becomes exhausted. Stillness restores clarity. Psalm 62:5 encourages the soul to find rest in God alone, because hope comes from Him. When the mind withdraws from constant distraction, it reconnects with truth. In quiet moments, identity becomes clearer and anxiety loses its grip. There are internal battles no one else sees. Smiles may hide struggles and strength may appear effortless from the outside, while fierce wars occur within. The strongest individuals are often those who fight unseen battles with persistent faith. 2 Corinthians 4:16 reminds believers not to lose heart, because though outwardly we may weaken, inwardly we are renewed day by day. Renewal happens internally long before circumstances reflect change. The mind must learn to interpret delays differently. Delays are often mistaken for denial. Waiting seasons can feel frustrating, especially when effort seems unrewarded. Yet Ecclesiastes 3 teaches that every purpose has its appointed time. Growth beneath the surface prepares a person to sustain blessings when they arrive. Without preparation, success can destroy character, but with preparation, success becomes stewardship. Mental strength requires guarding hope during uncertainty. Hope is fragile when constantly exposed to negativity. Therefore, the mind must intentionally choose environments, conversations, and influences that nurture faith. Proverbs 13:20 teaches that walking with the wise leads to wisdom. Surrounding the mind with encouragement strengthens resilience, while constant negativity weakens resolve. Fear frequently disguises itself as logic. The mind creates convincing arguments explaining why dreams are impossible or why risks should be avoided. But faith challenges these internal narratives. Scripture repeatedly commands courage, not because fear disappears, but because courage must override fear. Isaiah 41:10 assures believers not to fear because God strengthens and upholds them. This promise becomes mental armor against intimidation. One of the greatest signs of mental maturity is emotional stability during chaos. When circumstances become unstable, a disciplined mind refuses panic. Peace becomes an internal decision rather than a reaction to external calm. John 14:27 speaks of peace given not as the world gives. This peace exists independent of circumstance because it flows from trust rather than control. A strong mind learns from failure instead of being defined by it. Failure often feels personal, but it is instructional. Peter failed publicly yet continued to fulfill divine purpose because failure did not cancel calling. Proverbs 24:16 reminds us again that righteous individuals rise repeatedly after falling. The difference between defeat and growth lies in response. Mental conditioning includes learning to rest without quitting. Rest restores strength, while quitting abandons purpose. Even creation includes rhythms of rest. Exodus 33:14 promises divine presence bringing rest. Rest is not weakness but wisdom. A rested mind thinks clearly, makes wiser decisions, and sustains endurance longer. Gratitude remains one of the most powerful tools for strengthening the mind. When gratitude becomes a daily practice, the brain shifts from focusing on problems toward recognizing blessings. Psalm 103 encourages remembering benefits and not forgetting goodness received. Gratitude builds resilience because it reminds the heart that challenges do not erase blessings already present. There will be seasons when obedience requires walking without visible confirmation. Faith often operates without immediate evidence. Abraham journeyed without knowing the destination fully, yet trusted divine guidance. Hebrews 11 celebrates individuals who moved forward based on promise rather than certainty. Mental strength grows when action aligns with faith even before understanding arrives. Comparison continues to be one of the most dangerous enemies of mental stability. Social environments constantly display achievements, creating pressure to measure personal worth against others. Yet Galatians 6:4 encourages examining one's own work rather than comparing with others. Purpose is personal. Progress cannot be measured using another person's timeline. The mind must also learn resilience through rejection. Rejection wounds deeply because it challenges belonging and worth, yet rejection often redirects rather than diminishes destiny. Joseph experienced betrayal, rejection, and imprisonment before leadership emerged. Genesis 50:20 reveals that what others intended for harm was transformed for good. Mental strength interprets rejection as redirection. Confidence develops through obedience in small things. Many wait for extraordinary moments while ignoring daily disciplines. Luke 16:10 teaches that faithfulness in small responsibilities leads to greater trust. Each small act of discipline strengthens mental endurance, preparing the heart for larger assignments. Mental strength requires confronting limiting beliefs inherited from past experiences. Childhood failures, criticism, or cultural expectations can shape internal narratives. Yet truth liberates the mind. John 8:32 teaches that knowing truth brings freedom. Freedom begins when false identities are replaced with divine affirmation. There are moments when loneliness accompanies growth. As mindset changes, relationships, environments, and habits evolve. Growth may create temporary isolation. Yet Psalm 68:6 reminds believers that God sets the lonely in families. Isolation during transformation often prepares individuals for healthier connections aligned with purpose. A disciplined mind learns to celebrate progress even when perfection remains distant. Small victories matter because they confirm movement. Zechariah 4:10 warns against despising small beginnings. Every great accomplishment begins quietly before becoming visible. Recognizing progress strengthens motivation. Mental resilience deepens when focus shifts from outcome to obedience. Obedience remains within personal control, while outcomes belong to divine timing. Colossians 3:23 encourages working wholeheartedly as unto the Lord, rather than for human approval. This mindset frees the mind from anxiety related to results. Adversity also reveals hidden courage. Many individuals underestimate their strength until challenges force growth. Isaiah 43:2 promises divine presence through waters, rivers, and fire. Strength emerges not by avoiding difficulty but by walking through it with faith. Forgiveness continues to be essential for mental freedom. Holding on to offense traps thoughts in the past. Forgiveness releases emotional energy previously consumed by resentment. Matthew 6:14 emphasizes forgiveness as a pathway to spiritual freedom. A forgiven heart experiences lighter thoughts and renewed peace. Mental conditioning requires daily renewal. Just as physical bodies require nourishment, the mind requires constant spiritual input. Psalm 1 describes a person meditating on God's law day and night, becoming like a tree planted by streams of water. Consistent spiritual reflection stabilizes thoughts even during drought seasons. There will be times when progress feels invisible. Seeds planted through prayer, discipline, and faith may remain unseen for long periods. Yet unseen growth remains real. Mark 4:26-29 describes seeds growing silently while the farmer sleeps. Mental strength trusts processes beyond immediate visibility. Self-control becomes a defining mark of mental maturity. Proverbs 16:32 declares that ruling one's spirit is greater than conquering a city. External victories mean little without internal mastery. Emotional regulation, decision-making, and patience demonstrate true strength. A strong mind learns to respond rather than react. Reaction is driven by emotion while response is guided by wisdom. James 1:19 encourages being quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Thoughtful responses preserve peace and prevent unnecessary conflict. Hope must be protected intentionally. Negative experiences attempt to convince the mind that future possibilities are limited. Yet Romans 15:13 speaks of overflowing hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. Hope becomes renewable energy sustaining perseverance. Mental strength also involves humility. Pride weakens growth because it resists correction. Proverbs 11:2 teaches that wisdom accompanies humility. A teachable mind continues growing while a defensive mind stagnates. Learning from correction strengthens character. There are seasons when courage means beginning again. Starting over requires humility and faith. Lamentations 3:22-23 reminds believers that mercies are renewed each morning. Every sunrise offers opportunity to restart with renewed determination. The disciplined mind refuses to allow temporary emotions to create permanent decisions. Feelings change, but consequences remain. Wisdom pauses before acting during emotional intensity. Proverbs 19:11 teaches that patience brings understanding and honor. Mental strength deepens through worship and gratitude during hardship. Worship shifts attention from problems toward divine greatness. Psalm 34:1 declares continual praise regardless of circumstance. Praise transforms atmosphere within the heart even when surroundings remain unchanged. Perseverance becomes a lifestyle rather than an occasional effort. Hebrews 10:36 emphasizes endurance as necessary for receiving promises. Endurance means continuing faithfully despite uncertainty, fatigue, or delay. Vision sustains resilience during prolonged challenges. Without vision, discouragement grows quickly. Proverbs 29:18 teaches that people perish without vision. A clear sense of purpose fuels mental stamina, enabling individuals to rise repeatedly after setbacks. The mind also learns courage through remembrance. Recalling past deliverance strengthens present faith. Psalm 77 describes remembering former works of God during distress. Memory becomes fuel for hope. Mental strength transforms adversity into testimony. Difficult seasons eventually become sources of encouragement for others. 2 Corinthians 1:4 explains that comfort received enables comforting others. Personal struggles gain meaning when they contribute to collective healing. Faith grows strongest when practiced daily rather than occasionally. Small, consistent acts of trust gradually reshape thinking patterns. Over time, anxiety loses dominance while confidence increases. Isaiah 30:15 teaches that strength is found in quietness and trust. A resilient mind refuses to surrender identity to circumstances. Economic struggles, rejection, or failure cannot redefine worth. Identity remains anchored in divine intention rather than external evaluation. Psalm 139 affirms intentional creation and personal value. There will always be voices attempting to limit vision. Critics' doubts and internal insecurities challenge progress. Yet Nehemiah continued rebuilding despite opposition because focus remained fixed on purpose. Nehemiah 6:3 reflects determination, declaring commitment to great work. Mental strength learns to ignore distractions that do not align with calling. Growth requires leaving comfort zones repeatedly. Familiar environments feel safe, but rarely produce expansion. Faith invites movement beyond familiarity. Genesis 12 shows Abraham leaving known territory toward promise. Courage expands mental capacity. A strong mind learns endurance through consistent prayer. Prayer aligns thoughts with divine perspective, replacing anxiety with assurance. Philippians 4:6-7 encourages presenting requests through prayer, resulting in peace guarding hearts and minds. Mental conditioning also includes celebrating others without insecurity. Rejoicing in another person's success protects the heart from jealousy. Romans 12:15 encourages rejoicing with those who rejoice. A secure mind recognizes that another's blessing does not diminish personal destiny. There are moments when surrender becomes strength. Surrender does not mean defeat, but trust. Releasing control allows peace to replace anxiety. Psalm 55:22 invites casting burdens upon the Lord with assurance of support. The journey toward mental strength continues daily. Each decision, each thought, each prayer contributes to inner transformation. Gradually, the mind becomes steady, courageous, and hopeful, regardless of circumstance. Fear loses authority. Doubt loses influence. Confidence rooted in faith becomes natural rather than forced. And as this process continues, the individual discovers an unshakable resilience forming quietly within, where challenges no longer determine emotional stability and obstacles no longer define possibility, where perseverance becomes instinct and faith becomes vision guiding every step forward, where the mind, once fragile, now stands firm, prepared to rise above every challenge and continue moving forward with renewed courage, deeper wisdom, and unwavering determination. And as this deeper strengthening continues within the mind, something profound begins to happen that cannot be explained by environment alone. The internal world starts to reshape the external response to life. Situations that once triggered panic no longer control emotional reactions. Thoughts that once collapsed under pressure now stand firm with clarity. It is as if the mind is being trained to operate from a higher level of awareness, where circumstances are no longer masters, but simply passing conditions. This is the quiet work of transformation, where God builds resilience not by removing pressure, but by teaching dominion over it. There comes a point where the mind begins to recognize that every challenge carries hidden instruction. Romans 5:3-4 reveals that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. This is not poetic language but spiritual psychology. It describes a process where pressure becomes curriculum. The mind that understands this no longer wastes pain. It extracts meaning from struggle. It learns to ask not why is this happening to me, but what is this developing in me? Mental strength is also revealed in the ability to remain stable when outcomes are uncertain. The natural mind demands immediate answers, immediate solutions, immediate clarity, but faith develops a different posture. It teaches the mind to rest even when answers are delayed. Hebrews 11:1 defines faith as assurance in what is not seen. This means mental stability is not dependent on visible confirmation. It is anchored in unseen conviction. A strong mind learns to walk forward even when the full path is not revealed. There are seasons when God intentionally slows down external progress to accelerate internal growth. During those seasons, nothing appears to be happening externally, yet internally everything is being rearranged. Thoughts are being refined. Desires are being purified. Motivations are being corrected. This is why Isaiah 55:8 reminds us that God's thoughts are higher than human thoughts. What feels like delay is often alignment. What feels like silence is often preparation. The mind must also learn the discipline of focus. In a world full of distraction, attention becomes a spiritual battleground. Whatever captures attention eventually shapes identity. Proverbs 4:25-27 instructs believers to keep their eyes fixed straight ahead and to avoid turning to the left or right. This is mental training. Focus is not accidental, it is cultivated. A distracted mind cannot sustain purpose, but a focused mind becomes unstoppable even in adversity. Mental strength grows when the mind stops negotiating with fear. Fear always exaggerates outcomes. It paints worst-case scenarios and presents them as certainty. But faith challenges those narratives. 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds us that God has given a sound mind, not a fearful one. A sound mind is stable, balanced, and anchored in truth. It does not deny challenges, but it refuses to be dominated by them. There is a powerful shift that happens when a person stops identifying with their struggle. Many people become what they repeatedly experience. If they experience failure, they begin to think they are failure. If they experience rejection, they begin to believe they are rejection. But mental strength breaks this cycle. It separates identity from experience. Romans 8:37 declares that believers are more than conquerors, not because they never face defeat, but because defeat cannot define them. A renewed mind begins to see setbacks as redirections. Joseph's journey is a profound example of this principle. Betrayal led to slavery, slavery led to prison, and prison led to leadership. What appeared as decline was actually progression. Genesis 50:20 reveals that what others intended for harm, God used for good. Mental strength learns to interpret life through divine perspective rather than emotional reaction. There is also a stage where the mind learns emotional regulation through spiritual grounding. Emotions are not enemies, but they must not become leaders. When emotions lead, decisions become unstable. When truth leads, decisions become wise. Psalm 46:10 calls for stillness, not because emotions disappear, but because clarity emerges in stillness. A strong mind does not suppress emotions, it disciplines response. Another layer of mental conditioning is endurance in obscurity. Many desire visibility but avoid hidden preparation. Yet Scripture repeatedly shows that God prepares people in unseen places before public assignment. David was in fields before thrones. Moses was in deserts before leadership. Obscurity is not absence of purpose, it is incubation of purpose. Mental strength accepts hidden seasons without resentment because it understands their necessity. The mind must also learn to resist mental fragmentation. Fragmentation happens when thoughts are scattered across worries, regrets, fears, and distractions. A fragmented mind cannot sustain peace. Philippians 4:6-7 teaches that prayer and thanksgiving guard the mind and bring peace beyond understanding. Peace is not the absence of complexity, but the presence of order within complexity. There is a powerful discipline in learning to think slowly and intentionally rather than reactively. Many problems are created not by circumstances, but by impulsive thinking. Proverbs 14:29 says that patience brings great understanding, while quick temper displays folly. Mental strength includes the ability to pause, reflect, and respond wisely instead of reacting emotionally. As the mind grows stronger, it begins to understand the value of restraint. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every opinion deserves response. Not every situation deserves emotional investment. Wisdom teaches selective engagement. Ecclesiastes 3 reminds us that there is a time for everything. Mental maturity includes knowing when to act and when to wait. Another transformation occurs when the mind stops fearing change. Change once felt threatening because it represented uncertainty, but now change is understood as movement toward growth. Hebrews 13:8 reminds us that God does not change even when seasons do. This gives stability in transitions. A strong mind learns that while circumstances shift, divine presence remains constant. There are moments when the mind must confront internal resistance. Resistance often appears when growth demands discomfort. It manifests as procrastination, doubt, or avoidance. But mental strength recognizes resistance as a signal of expansion. Just as physical muscles resist weight before growing stronger, the mind resists transformation before becoming renewed. Growth always begins at the edge of discomfort. Another essential aspect of mental strength is the ability to delay gratification. Immediate satisfaction weakens long-term vision. Discipline strengthens it. Proverbs 25:28 compares a person without self-control to a city broken into. A strong mind understands that not every desire is meant to be fulfilled immediately. Some blessings require preparation, maturity, and timing. The mind also learns to interpret opposition correctly. Opposition is not always evidence of failure. Often it is evidence of significance. Nehemiah faced resistance when rebuilding walls because purpose always attracts resistance. But Nehemiah 6:3 shows unwavering focus. I am doing a great work and cannot come down. Mental strength refuses to descend into distraction. There is a stage where prayer becomes not just a request but alignment. The mind begins to shift from asking God to change everything externally to asking for internal alignment with His will. Matthew 6:10 teaches your will be done. This is mental surrender. It is the highest form of trust, where the mind stops resisting divine direction. Mental strength also involves learning to interpret waiting seasons correctly. Waiting is not inactivity, it is formation. Isaiah 40:31 says those who wait upon the Lord renew their strength. Waiting builds endurance, patience, and dependence. A strong mind does not rush seasons it has not been prepared for. Another important dimension is learning to separate truth from perception. Perception is influenced by emotion, environment, and experience. Truth is anchored in divine reality. John 8:32 says truth brings freedom. Mental strength grows when truth becomes the filter through which all perception is evaluated. The mind must also be trained to resist internal sabotage. Many people defeat themselves long before external challenges arrive. Negative self-talk, doubt, and fear create internal barriers stronger than external ones. But 2 Corinthians 10:5 teaches that thoughts must be taken captive. This is mental authority. You do not negotiate with destructive thoughts, you replace them with truth. A strong mind also learns to recognize spiritual timing. Some opportunities are not delayed, they are reserved. Ecclesiastes 3:11 teaches that everything becomes beautiful in its time. Timing ensures readiness. Without timing, blessings can become burdens. As mental strength deepens, gratitude becomes natural even in incomplete situations. Gratitude is not denial of problems, it is recognition of presence and progress. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 instructs giving thanks in all circumstances. Gratitude reshapes mental focus from lack to sufficiency. There is also growth in learning to release control over outcomes. Control creates anxiety because it demands certainty. Trust creates peace because it accepts divine governance. Proverbs 3:5-6 encourages trust beyond understanding. Mental strength matures when control is surrendered without fear. The mind begins to recognize that identity is not built through achievement, but through divine assignment. Ephesians 2:10 declares that we are created with purpose, prepared in advance. This removes pressure from performance-based identity. A strong mind does not chase worth, it walks in it. There are also moments where courage must override comfort repeatedly. Courage is not a single decision, but a repeated discipline. Joshua 1:9 commands strength and courage consistently because fear will always attempt to return. Mental strength is built through repetition of courageous choices. The mind also learns the importance of reflection. Without reflection, lessons are repeated unnecessarily. Reflection transforms experience into wisdom. Psalm 119:15 says meditation on truth leads to understanding. A strong mind does not rush through life, it learns from it. As this inner strengthening continues, resilience becomes natural. No longer is strength something that is forced during crisis. It becomes the default posture of the mind. Challenges still come, but they no longer define internal stability. Peace remains steady even when storms rise. And even as this journey continues unfolding within thought, perception and spirit, the mind keeps expanding into greater awareness, deeper stability, and stronger endurance, learning continuously how to rise above every limitation placed before it, how to interpret life through truth rather than fear, and how to remain unshaken in the presence of pressure while still growing quietly, steadily, and powerfully into the full strength it was designed to carry. And as this deeper formation continues within the mind, something even more profound begins to emerge: clarity that is no longer easily shaken by emotion or circumstance. The mind starts to see life differently. Where confusion once dominated, understanding begins to take root. Where fear once created distortion, truth begins to bring alignment. This is not the result of external change, but internal renewal. Romans 12:2 becomes more than instruction, it becomes lived reality as the mind is continuously transformed by divine truth. At this stage, mental strength is no longer about fighting thoughts, but about mastering them. The battle shifts from reaction to governance. Thoughts still come, but they no longer rule. Feelings still arise, but they no longer dominate. Instead, the mind begins to function like a disciplined gatekeeper, allowing only what aligns with truth, purpose, and identity. 2 Corinthians 10:5 becomes active practice. Every thought is examined, challenged, and brought into alignment with higher truth. There is a noticeable shift in how challenges are interpreted. What once felt like setbacks now begins to feel like structured resistance designed to build capacity. The mind stops asking, "Why is this happening?" and begins asking, "What is this developing?" This shift alone transforms suffering into strategy. James 1:3 becomes reality as testing produces endurance, and endurance begins shaping maturity rather than breaking confidence. Mental strength also reveals itself in emotional stability during unanswered prayers. There are moments when heaven feels silent, when direction seems unclear, when outcomes remain hidden. Yet instead of panic, the mind learns patience. Isaiah 30:18 speaks of God waiting to be gracious, which reveals that delay is not abandonment but timing. A conditioned mind no longer interprets silence as absence. It interprets it as formation. There is also a deeper understanding developing within identity. The mind begins to detach from labels given by failure, rejection, or misunderstanding. Instead, identity becomes anchored in divine purpose. Psalm 139:14 reminds us of intentional creation. This truth stabilizes mental health because worth is no longer dependent on performance or approval. When identity becomes secure, anxiety begins to lose its authority. As mental strength increases, so does the ability to remain consistent under pressure. Consistency becomes more valuable than intensity. Many people start strong but collapse under sustained pressure. But mental conditioning builds endurance over time. Galatians 6:9 encourages not growing weary in doing good because harvest is tied to perseverance, not intensity. The mind learns that what is repeated becomes what is established. Another transformation occurs in the way the mind handles criticism. Earlier stages of development are easily shaken by opinions of others, but a strengthened mind begins to filter feedback. Not all criticism is absorbed, not all opinions are accepted as truth. The mind learns discernment. Proverbs 4:23 teaches guarding the heart because it determines life direction. Mental strength includes protecting internal space from unnecessary contamination. There is also growth in emotional detachment from outcomes. This does not mean indifference, it means trust. The mind learns to act faithfully without becoming emotionally dependent on immediate results. This is what allows peace to coexist with uncertainty. Philippians 4:6-7 describes peace that surpasses understanding, guarding both heart and mind. This peace becomes evidence of mental maturity. At this stage, resilience becomes instinctive. The mind no longer requires external motivation to persist. Discipline becomes internalized. Even when external support is absent, internal conviction remains strong. This is what creates consistency in calling. Hebrews 10:23 encourages holding firmly to hope without wavering. A trained mind no longer depends on emotional highs to function faithfully. There is also a noticeable reduction in internal noise. The mind becomes less cluttered with unnecessary worry, comparison, and hypothetical fears. Instead, clarity increases. Decisions become simpler because priorities become aligned. Wisdom replaces confusion. James 1:5 assures that wisdom is given generously to those who seek it. Mental strength includes the ability to simplify complexity through truth. Another dimension of mental conditioning is learning to remain grounded in present responsibility rather than future anxiety. Many people lose strength not because of current challenges, but because of imagined ones. The mind projects fear into the future and suffers in advance. But Matthew 6:34 instructs not to worry about tomorrow. A strengthened mind learns to remain present, faithful, and focused on today's assignment. There is also a deep transformation in how waiting seasons are handled. Waiting no longer feels like delay but like development. In earlier stages, waiting creates frustration. In mature stages, waiting creates reflection and refinement. Ecclesiastes 3:11 reminds us that timing is divinely ordered. Mental strength allows patience without resentment because trust replaces urgency. As mental strength deepens further, gratitude becomes more consistent. Even in difficulty, the mind begins to recognize evidence of grace. Gratitude shifts perception from scarcity to awareness. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 reinforces giving thanks in all situations. This does not deny hardship, but reframes it through awareness of ongoing divine support. There is also a growing awareness of internal responsibility. The mind stops blaming circumstances for emotional instability. Instead, it begins to recognize its own role in shaping response. This shift is critical. Proverbs 16:32 emphasizes self-control as greater than external conquest. Mental strength is revealed when a person can govern internal reactions regardless of external triggers. Another stage of development involves learning to process pain without being controlled by it. Pain is no longer suppressed or avoided, it is understood and processed through truth. Psalm 34:18 reminds that God is near the brokenhearted. This awareness allows emotional healing without identity collapse. A strong mind does not deny pain, it transcends it. There is also maturity in recognizing the value of slow growth. Modern thinking often glorifies speed, but true strength is often slow and steady. Trees do not grow overnight, neither does resilience. Psalm 1 compares a stable life to a tree planted by water, producing fruit in season. Mental strength accepts process over pressure. At this level, the mind begins to develop resistance against emotional manipulation. It becomes less reactive to external influence. Opinions, trends, and pressures lose their control. Instead, truth becomes the anchor. John 8:32 reminds that truth brings freedom. A free mind is one that is no longer controlled by external emotional currents. There is also a deepening awareness of spiritual alignment. The mind begins to recognize when thoughts align with truth and when they deviate. This discernment becomes sharper over time. Hebrews 5:14 describes maturity as the ability to distinguish good from evil through practice. Mental strength is built through consistent alignment with truth until discernment becomes instinctive. Another transformation occurs in how failure is perceived. Failure is no longer identity, but feedback. Instead of internal collapse, there is evaluation and adjustment. Proverbs 24:16 reinforces rising again after falling. A strong mind does not romanticize failure, but it also does not fear it. It learns from it. There is also growth in the ability to endure misunderstanding. Not everyone will understand the journey or the process. Early stages seek validation, but mature stages accept misunderstanding without internal disruption. Galatians 1:10 challenges seeking approval from people over God. Mental strength is revealed when approval is no longer required for obedience. As this formation continues, the mind begins to experience a deeper sense of stability even in unpredictable environments. External instability no longer creates internal chaos. This is what spiritual grounding produces. Psalm 46:1 describes God as refuge and strength, present help in trouble. This truth stabilizes thought patterns even during uncertainty. There is also transformation in decision-making. Decisions become less impulsive and more intentional. The mind begins to pause, reflect, and align choices with long-term purpose rather than short-term relief. Proverbs 3:6 encourages acknowledging God in all decisions so direction becomes aligned. Mental strength produces wise decision-making under pressure. Another sign of maturity is emotional recovery speed. Earlier stages may remain stuck in emotional reactions for long periods, but a trained mind recovers faster. It does not dwell excessively in negativity. Instead, it processes, learns, and moves forward. Isaiah 40:31 speaks of renewed strength, indicating restoration after depletion. There is also a deeper awareness of purpose-driven endurance. The mind begins to recognize that endurance is not just survival but preparation for responsibility. Every challenge survived increases capacity for greater assignment. Romans 8:18 suggests present suffering cannot compare to future glory. Mental strength holds this perspective firmly. At this point, distractions lose their appeal. The mind becomes selective about what deserves attention. Time and energy are guarded more carefully. Ephesians 5:16 encourages redeeming time because days are limited. A strengthened mind understands that focus determines fruitfulness. Another important development is internal peace during external chaos. This peace is not dependent on circumstances but on trust. John 14:27 describes peace given by God that is different from worldly peace. This internal stability becomes evidence of transformation. There is also growth in spiritual awareness. The mind begins to recognize patterns, timing, and guidance more clearly. Discernment becomes sharper, and confusion decreases. Proverbs 3:5-6 becomes lived experience as trust replaces dependence on limited understanding. As mental strength continues to mature, the mind becomes less reactive, more reflective, less fearful, more grounded, less chaotic, more ordered. It begins to operate from a place of stability that external conditions cannot easily disturb. And even as this process continues unfolding deeper and deeper within thought, perception, and emotional response, the transformation keeps shaping resilience, wisdom, patience, and clarity until the mind becomes steady enough to face every challenge without collapsing under pressure, and strong enough to rise above every obstacle with quiet confidence rooted in truth that continues to guide every step forward. And now, as we reach the final reflection of this journey, something becomes undeniably clear within the heart and mind. Mental strength was never about becoming untouched by struggle, nor was it about escaping challenges or rising above life in isolation. It was always about becoming unshakable within it. It was about learning to stand when pressure rises, to think clearly when confusion surrounds, and to remain grounded when everything around you tries to pull you off course. True strength was never the absence of storms, it was the presence of stability within them. You now see that every layer of this transformation had purpose. The battles that once felt overwhelming were shaping resilience. The delays that once created frustration were building patience. The silence that once felt like abandonment was actually formation. And the pressure that once felt unbearable was strengthening your capacity to carry more than you thought possible. Romans 8:28 now speaks with deeper meaning, reminding you that all things truly work together for good for those who are called according to divine purpose. Nothing was wasted, not one tear, not one struggle, not one silent prayer. You understand now that mental strength is not something you stumble upon, it is something you are built into through experience, surrender, and renewal. It is formed when thoughts are disciplined, when truth replaces fear, and when faith becomes stronger than emotional reaction. It is developed when the mind learns to pause before panic, to trust before understanding, and to endure before quitting. What once felt like breaking was actually becoming. There is also a deeper realization that emerges at this point. Your mind is not your enemy. It is your responsibility. It is the place where victory is decided long before circumstances respond. That is why Proverbs 23:7 reminds us that, as a person thinks in their heart, so they become. The life you experience is shaped by the thoughts you repeatedly accept. When truth governs the mind, life begins to align with stability. When fear governs the mind, life begins to reflect instability. This is why renewal of the mind is not optional, it is essential. Looking back, you begin to appreciate the hidden grace that carried you through seasons you did not think you would survive. You realize now that strength was not absent in weakness, it was being formed within it. Even in moments when you felt overwhelmed, you were still being held. Even in times when clarity was missing, direction was still unfolding. Even when progress felt invisible, growth was still taking place beneath the surface. Isaiah 41:10 becomes personal truth. You were strengthened, helped, and upheld even when you were unaware of it. And now, as awareness deepens, you also recognize that mental strength is not a destination but a continuous way of living. It is not something you achieve once and keep forever without effort. It is something you maintain daily through discipline, prayer, reflection, and truth. It is choosing faith again and again when fear returns. It is choosing peace again and again when anxiety rises. It is choosing wisdom again and again when emotion tries to lead. You also come to understand that true strength is quiet. It does not always announce itself. It is often found in unseen moments where no one applauds your discipline. No one witnesses your internal battles, and no one celebrates your decision to keep going. Yet heaven sees what people do not see, and what is built in secret becomes stability in public. Matthew 6:6 reminds us that what is done in secret is rewarded openly. Mental strength is often formed in those hidden spaces. As this realization settles, fear begins to lose its authority. Challenges no longer appear as threats but as opportunities to demonstrate growth. Uncertainty no longer feels like danger but like space for trust to deepen. And failure no longer feels like identity but like instruction. The mind becomes less fragile, more anchored, less reactive, more intentional, less scattered, more focused. And perhaps the most powerful understanding of all is this: you were never meant to rely solely on your own strength. Mental strength was always designed to be connected to a higher source of wisdom, peace, and stability. Isaiah 26:3 becomes living reality. Perfect peace belongs to those whose minds are stayed on God. That peace is not fragile. It does not depend on circumstances. It holds steady even when everything else shakes. So now, as you stand in this awareness, you are no longer the same. You think differently. You respond differently. You endure differently. You see differently. And most importantly, you understand differently. The journey did not just teach you how to survive challenges, it taught you how to rise within them. And even as life continues with its unknowns, one truth remains unmovable. The mind that is renewed, disciplined, and anchored in truth cannot be easily defeated. Because strength is no longer something you are waiting to find. It is something that has already been built within you, layer by layer, season by season, moment by moment, through every experience that shaped who you are becoming. And from here, the journey does not end. It simply continues with greater awareness, deeper stability, and a mind now conditioned not to break under pressure, but to rise above it.